The wind howled through the dense trees, carrying with it an eerie sense of unease. It was a peaceful night on the outskirts of the military camp, far from the sounds of constant warfare. But for Sergeant Liam Rivers, the silence only felt like the calm before the storm. He had been stationed on this remote planet for months, and the same routine had kept him busy. Little did he know that very night would be unlike any other. The war had escalated quickly, with alien forces attacking from every direction. The humans had been caught off guard when the Vulpine, an alien race known for their fierce appearance and cunning tactics, suddenly attacked. Their tactics were ruthless, leaving the humans to fight for their survival in a strange, unfamiliar world. As Liam sat by the campfire, his thoughts wandered back to his previous battles. He had seen too much death, too many close calls. Yet, nothing had prepared him for what he would face now. The Vulpine were known for their ruthless behavior, but their carnivorous nature had always been more of a rumor. A myth spread by soldiers trying to scare each other. Still, even rumors could carry truth, and the possibility of facing an alien predator filled Liam with an uneasy dread. The Vulpine were predators, no doubt about it, and rumors of their vicious hunts only fueled his fear. Stories of men getting caught and disappearing without a trace haunted his thoughts, but as he sat there, looking up at the starry sky, he couldn't help but wonder if those stories were just that, stories. After all, the war was still young, and nothing was certain. The unknown of it all gnawed at him. Suddenly, the distant sound of crackling branches broke his thoughts. Liam's hand instinctively reached for his rifle. He had been trained to stay alert, especially when the sounds of the jungle grew quieter than usual. The Vulpine had a way of moving silently, hunting their prey with deadly precision. The figure emerged from the shadows, its movements smooth and calculated. Liam's heart raced as the creature stepped closer. Its eyes gleamed in the dark, glowing like amber in the night. He tightened his grip on the rifle, unsure of whether to fire or wait. The creature's silhouette was unmistakable. It was a Vulpine, but unlike any he had seen before. This one was different. Her fur shimmered in the moonlight, a fiery red, tail flowing behind her like a wave of flame. Her sleek, muscular body was covered in dark battle armor that seemed to blend seamlessly with the night. But it wasn't her appearance alone that made Liam's pulse quicken. It was the way she moved, graceful yet deadly, like a predator that had mastered the art of stealth. The Vulpine woman stopped just a few feet away from him. Her gaze locked onto his. There was no fear in her eyes, only calculation. Liam's breath caught in his throat as she took a step forward. His heart pounded in his chest, but he stood his ground. The rumors, the stories, everything told him that this was the moment he would either live or die. But instead of attacking, the alien woman's gaze softened. Her amber eyes scanned him for a moment, as if deciding something. Then slowly she lowered her spear, the sharp tip of the weapon glinting in the moonlight. For a moment, Liam didn't know what to do. His training told him to act, to fight, to survive. But something in the way she held herself made him hesitate. Was this some kind of trick? His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The Vulpine were known for their bloodthirsty nature, their reputation as fierce, carnivorous warriors who would devour their enemies. But this one didn't act like the stories. Before he could react, the woman spoke in a voice that was both calm and powerful. "You think I'm going to eat you?" Her words were clipped, each syllable sharp as a blade. Liam's mouth went dry, his thoughts a swirl of confusion. Could she understand him? Could she read his mind? How did she know what he was thinking? The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. This wasn't how he had imagined his end. The stories had led him to believe the Vulpine would tear him apart, their vicious teeth sinking into his flesh. But now, facing this alien woman, Liam realized just how wrong he had been. She wasn't here to kill him. But what was her true purpose? The night seemed to stretch on forever as the two of them stood, locked in an eerie silence. Liam had never felt more unsure of what was about to happen. The air between them was thick with tension. His mind was a maze of questions. Was this the beginning of a new war? Or had he stumbled into something far more dangerous and complex than he could ever imagine? As the woman took another step toward him, her gaze unwavering, Liam could only brace himself for what was coming next. This was the moment that would change everything. Liam's heart was still racing, his breath shallow as he tried to make sense of the alien before him. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them standing in the eerie silence of the night. The Vulpine woman, with her fiery red fur and intense amber eyes, was an enigma. She wasn't attacking him, but she wasn't backing away either. Her gaze seemed to weigh him, as if she were trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to understand her. The fear that had once gripped him began to shift into curiosity. What was going on? Why hadn't she attacked? Why wasn't she following the pattern of the Vulpine he'd heard so much about? Liam's fingers were still on the rifle, but now it felt heavier, almost like a burden. He wasn't sure if he should hold it up, aim it, or drop it. His military training screamed at him to act, to be ready for whatever came next. But his instincts told him that if he fired now, it would only make things worse. The woman's lips parted, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "You fear me," she said, her tone calm yet somehow accusing. It wasn't a question, it was an observation. Liam swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. His voice felt caught in his throat. He had no idea how to communicate with this alien, let alone one who seemed to be able to read his thoughts. He wasn't sure whether to be more afraid of her understanding or the fact that she wasn't doing anything to harm him. I'm not sure what to think," Liam finally managed, his voice shaking slightly. "I've heard stories, but you're not what I expected." The Vulpine woman tilted her head slightly, her ears flicking. She didn't seem offended or even surprised by his words. Instead, she seemed thoughtful, as if she had anticipated this reaction. "You think I'm a monster," she said, taking another step closer. "You think I will eat you?" Liam didn't know how to respond to that. The thought of the Vulpine, these fierce carnivorous aliens coming to slaughter and feast on him, had haunted his dreams. Yet standing here, face to face with one, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was different. She wasn't what he had been taught to fear. Her eyes softened as she studied him. "I'm not here to kill you," she said, her voice low but clear. "But you humans, you never understand. You fear what you don't know." Liam was still processing her words when he felt a strange warmth in the air. He looked around, confused. The stars above seemed to burn brighter, the landscape painted in hues of red and orange by the setting sun. It was like the whole world was waiting, holding its breath. Without warning, the Vulpine woman raised her hand, and with a smooth motion, she gestured for him to follow her. "Come with me," she said simply, her voice carrying an almost inviting tone. "You have much to learn." Liam hesitated. This was all too much too fast. Nothing about this situation made sense. He had been trained to fight, to survive against the Vulpine at all costs. But now, standing in front of this alien, it felt like the rules had changed. What was she offering? Was this a trap? Was this some new tactic to lure him in before the attack? Yet for reasons he couldn't fully explain, something told him he had to go with her. Perhaps it was the way she spoke, or the calmness in her voice, or maybe it was just the sheer confusion of the situation. But despite his better judgment, he found himself lowering his rifle and following her. She led him through the dense jungle, her movements graceful and fluid like a predator in her element. Despite her appearance, there was no hint of aggression. Instead, it felt as if she was guiding him, showing him something he was meant to see. Liam followed cautiously, keeping his distance but unable to ignore the curiosity that had taken root inside him. What was going on? What did she mean by much? To learn? They reached a clearing a few minutes later, and Liam's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't just another part of the jungle, it was something else entirely. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a massive structure. Something he couldn't have imagined even in his wildest dreams. It was a ship, but not like any ship he had ever seen before. It was sleek, alien in design, and glowing with faint blue light that seemed to pulse with life. The ship was like a living creature itself, and as Liam stared at it, he realized that this was no ordinary Vulpine craft. "This is my ship," the Vulpine woman said, turning to him with a soft smile. "That seemed to hold secrets. And it is where you will learn the truth." The air grew still, and Liam felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what she meant, but somehow, he knew that whatever was about to happen next would change the course of everything he knew. Vulpine woman's gaze locked with his, her amber eyes glowing in the dim light. "You thought you knew the Vulpine, but you know nothing." And with those words, Liam felt his world begin to shift in ways he could never have imagined. Liam's mind raced as he gazed at the alien ship before him. The sleek, organic design seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive. It was nothing like the cold, metallic ships humans used for battle. This was something else entirely. The colors that rippled across its surface reminded him of the deep ocean, full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. The Vulpine woman stood beside him, her gaze locked onto the ship. She didn't seem to notice the confusion and awe that had taken hold of Liam. He, on the other hand, couldn't look away. He had always heard stories of alien technology, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. Is this yours?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her as she walked toward the ship, her movements fluid and graceful. The soft rustling of leaves underfoot was the only sound as they crossed the clearing. Liam felt his pulse quicken with each step. Part of him wanted to run. Everything in his training told him to stay on guard, to question everything. But another part of him, something deeper, something more primal, urged him to stay, to see where this strange journey would take him. The Vulpine woman stopped just in front of the ship's entrance. A soft, low hum filled the air, and a portion of the ship's hull seemed to shift and open like a blooming flower. The door slid back effortlessly, revealing an interior bathed in a soft blue light. She turned to Liam. "Come inside. There's much you need to understand." Liam hesitated, but found himself stepping forward, compelled by an unfamiliar curiosity. The inside of the ship was like nothing he had ever seen before. The walls were smooth, like the surface of water, and the entire interior had a strange, organic feel to it. The lighting was dim but soothing, casting an ethereal glow on the surfaces around him. He followed the Vulpine woman through the corridors, the quiet hum of the ship surrounding them. Like a living entity, it felt as though the ship itself were watching him, analyzing him, just like the woman beside him. Eventually, they came to a chamber that seemed to be the heart of the ship. A large circular table stood in the center of the room, surrounded by chairs. The walls were lined with strange symbols that seemed to move and shift, as if they were alive. The Vulpine woman motioned for him to sit. Liam reluctantly took a seat, still unsure of what was happening. His mind was racing with questions. What did she want from him? What was this ship? And why was she showing it to him? The Vulpine woman sat across from him, her eyes intense and unwavering. She seemed to be waiting for him to say something, but he didn't know where to begin. Finally, she spoke. "You came here thinking we were the enemy. You believed we would destroy you, that we were beasts, only interested in hunting and feeding. But that is not who we are." Her voice was calm, yet there was an underlying strength in it that made Liam's heart beat faster. "We are not monsters, human. We are survivors like you." Liam blinked, trying to process her words. But the stories are lies," she interrupted. her tone sharper now. "Rumors spread by those who fear what they don't understand. You are not the first to believe us to be mindless killers. But that's not the truth. You humans and the Vulpine are more alike than you realize." Liam's mind reeled. He had never been taught to think of the Vulpine this way. To him, they were the enemy, the creatures who came from the depths of space to conquer and destroy. But here, sitting across from this alien, everything he thought he knew was being questioned. "What are you saying?" Liam asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "If you're not here to kill us, then why the war? Why attack us?" The Vulpine woman sighed, leaning back in her chair. The war was never about conquest. It was about survival. We were forced to fight, to defend ourselves from the human forces that came to our home. We've been hunted, chased across the stars. The stories you've heard, the battles you've fought, they were not our choice." Liam was silent, his mind trying to process the weight of her words. "So you've been defending yourselves? Against us?" he asked, still struggling to grasp it. "Yes," she answered simply. "We didn't choose this. We didn't come here for war. We came because we had nowhere else to go. Our home is gone. Our people are scattered across the galaxy, hiding, fighting to survive. And your people came looking for resources, looking to claim what wasn't yours." Liam felt a pang of guilt in his chest. The truth was hard to accept. He had been taught to believe that they were the good guys, the ones fighting for survival. But in this moment, he realized that the Vulpine were just as much victims of a larger conflict as his own people were. For the first time since he had landed on this planet, Liam began to see the Vulpine in a different light, not as monsters, but as fellow survivors. They had been driven to desperate measures, forced to defend themselves from the very humans he had been taught to protect. But before he could process this new reality further, the woman's voice broke through his thoughts. "Now that you understand, it's time to make a choice." Liam looked up at her, his heart pounding. "What choice?" "Help us," she said simply. "Help us stop the war. Help us survive. Because if we don't work together, neither of us will survive what's coming." Liam sat in stunned silence, his mind whirling with everything the Vulpine woman had just revealed. Her words echoed in his head, each one like a stone sinking deeper into his thoughts. Help us survive. Help us stop the war. The Vulpine, the very creatures he had been taught to fear, to destroy, were now asking for his help. The choice she had given him felt impossible. How could he trust them? Could he really set aside everything he knew about the war? He felt the weight of her gaze, unwavering, watching him like a hawk. Her amber eyes seemed to peer into the depths of his soul, as if she already knew what he was thinking. Liam's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair as he struggled to find words. I don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "I'm a soldier. My mission is clear. I fight to protect humanity. How can I just turn my back on that?" The Vulpine woman's expression didn't change, but there was a slight softness in her eyes. "You think this is about sides, human. You think it's about choosing between your people and mine. But it's not. It's about survival. If you don't help us, both of our races will be wiped out. That's the truth." Her words hung in the air like a cold fog, and Liam shivered, despite the warm glow of the ship around him. He had been so focused on the war, on the idea of his enemies being the other, the Vulpine, the ones with the sharp teeth and claws. But now the enemy didn't seem so clear. Both sides were fighting for survival. Both sides had lost something they could never get back. "Why should I trust you?" Liam finally asked, the question he had been holding back for so long. "How do I know you're not lying to me? How do I know this isn't just another trick? A way to get us to drop our guard?" The Vulpine woman stood and stepped closer to him. Her fiery red tail swished behind her, and the soft hum of the ship seemed to grow louder, as if the entire vessel was holding its breath. Because I have no reason to lie, she said, her voice steady, unshaken. You've seen what we've done to survive. We've fought, we've bled, we've lost. Just like you. Just like every species that's ever been cornered. But I'm not here to deceive you. I'm here because we believe that there's a way to stop this. To end the war. To give both our people a chance. Liam felt something shift. In him, like a small crack in the wall he had built around himself. It wasn't enough to make him fully trust her, but it was enough to make him question everything he had been taught. I'm not asking you to betray your people, she continued, her voice softer now. I'm asking you to help us prevent a future where we all destroy each other. We have technology, knowledge that could help you, but we need allies, not enemies. Without your help, we're going to lose, and so will you. The weight of her words hung heavy in the room. Liam sat there, frozen in thought, his mind torn between duty and what he was beginning to feel was the truth. The war hadn't been his fault. The Vulpine weren't the bloodthirsty monsters he had been taught to fear. They were fighting to survive, just like he was. He thought of the countless battles he had fought in, the people he had lost. He thought of his comrades, back at the base, fighting the Vulpine without ever questioning why they were fighting. To them, the war was clear. The Vulpine were the enemy. But here, with the woman standing before him, everything was different. The lines weren't so clear-cut. You want me to convince my people to stop fighting? Liam asked, the enormity of what she was asking settling on him like a weight too heavy to bear. The Vulpine woman nodded. Yes, if you can, we can show them what we know. We can work together to end the war before it destroys both of us. But time is running out. The longer we fight, the harder it will be to stop. Liam stood up abruptly, pacing around the chamber. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. He had always known that war was a complicated, messy thing, but he had never been this close to seeing the true cost of it. The Vulpine were not just a threat. They were survivors, fighting for their very existence. Could he really change everything he had been taught in order to help them? Could he betray his comrades' trust? A voice inside him urged him to act, to do the right thing. But another part of him, the soldier part, told him that this was madness. It was treason. How could he walk away from the only life he had ever known? The Vulpine woman watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak, but the weight of her silence pushed him to make a decision. She knew it wasn't easy. She knew the consequences of the choice he was about to make. After what felt like an eternity, Liam stopped pacing and looked back at her. His eyes were filled with conflict but also a sense of resolve. I'll help you, he said finally, his voice low but steady. But I can't do it alone. I'll need your help too. We'll need to convince both sides that there's a better way. And I'm not sure how I'm going to pull that off. The Vulpine woman's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was full of something more profound than mere satisfaction. You'll find a way, we both will. And with that, a new chapter of the war began, one that would not be fought with weapons, but with understanding. One that would demand sacrifices, courage, and the strength to change everything Liam had ever believed in. The decision had been made. Liam couldn't quite explain why he had chosen this path, but in that moment, it felt right. The Vulpine woman had spoken with such conviction, such quiet strength, that he couldn't ignore the possibility she was telling the truth. But as he left the ship's chamber and stepped back into the jungle, doubts crept into his mind. What was he doing? He was a soldier, a human soldier. He had been trained for war, not for diplomacy or peace. He had been taught to fight, to survive. How could he now stand by the very creatures he had been trained to destroy? Still, the Vulpine woman, her name, he learned, was Kale, had been clear. If they didn't stop the war now, neither side would survive. Her people had lost so much already, and the humans were just as close to the edge. The thought of more deaths, more destruction, It was almost too much to bear. As they walked through the jungle, the heavy silence between them felt like a weight. Kale moved with a quiet grace, the soft rustling of leaves beneath her feet barely audible. Every step she took seemed to belong to the earth itself, as if she was in tune with the land. Liam, on the other hand, felt out of place in this strange world. His boots scraped against the rocky ground, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. It was hard for him to shake the instinct to be alert, to watch for any potential threat. "Where are we going?" Liam asked, his voice breaking the silence. "To the front lines," Kale replied, without looking at him. "We need to make contact with your commanders. But before that, we must convince them we are not the enemy. If we fail, well then, all of this is for nothing." Liam couldn't help but wonder how they were going to pull that off. The Vulpine had been fighting for years. There was no way the humans would just stop and listen, not after everything that had happened. And yet, Kale was certain. She moved with a kind of quiet confidence that made Liam second-guess his own doubts. They reached the edge of a clearing, and Liam's heart skipped a beat. There, in the distance, he saw the faint silhouette of a human military base. The sight of it made the reality of the situation sink in harder. He was about to go to the very heart of the conflict, the place where soldiers like him were stationed. How could he possibly convince them to listen to an alien woman? "We have to be careful," Kale said, her voice low. "If they spot us before we can speak, they'll shoot first. That's why we need to move quietly." Liam nodded, feeling the weight of the mission on his shoulders. As they approached the base, the tension was almost unbearable. Every step felt like a decision between life and death. Kale moved through the shadows like a ghost, while Liam followed as quietly as he could. His military training was kicking in now, and he knew how to move silently when it mattered. But this was different. This was real. They reached the perimeter of the base undetected. But the next challenge was even more difficult, getting in without being noticed. They crouched down behind a large rock, peering out at the sentries guarding the entrance. "What now?" Liam whispered, feeling a pang of unease. Kale's eyes gleamed with determination. "We wait for the right moment," and they did. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching into what felt like hours. Liam's mind raced with thoughts of the soldiers back at the base, his comrades. How could he convince them that the Vulpine weren't their enemies? Would they even listen to him? Then, the moment came. A patrol of soldiers walked past their hiding spot, talking among themselves. Kale motioned for Liam to follow her, and they slipped behind them, careful to stay out of sight. They made their way to a small maintenance hatch in the back of the base, and Kale effortlessly disabled the security system. "Stay close," she murmured, leading him inside. The air was cool and sterile, the hum of machinery in the background. The inside of the base felt so different from the jungle, so cold, so human. Liam's heart was still racing, but he knew they couldn't afford to waste time. They had to find the right people, and they had to convince them to trust them. Kale led him through a series of narrow hallways, eventually stopping in front of a large door with a security badge reader. She didn't hesitate. With a quick movement, she disabled the security system, and the door slid open. Inside was a small conference room, and at the table sat several high-ranking officers, human officers. Liam's breath caught in his throat. This was it. This was the moment he had been dreading. Kale stepped forward, her posture straight and proud. "I'm Kale," she said, her voice echoing in the room. "And I've come to stop the war. You're all being lied to. The Vulpine are not your enemies." The officers looked at her, startled. One of them, a man with a weathered face, stood up. "What is this? Who are you? How did you get in here?" "I am not here to fight," Kale continued, her voice steady. "I am here to give you a choice. The Vulpine have lost enough. We need your help. We need to end this war before it destroys both of us." The room was silent for a long moment, The officers exchanging wary glances. Liam stepped forward, his voice cracking slightly. "She's telling the truth. We've been fighting for the wrong reasons. We've been told stories about the Vulpine. But those stories aren't real. We've been manipulated. This war, it's not what we think." The officers looked at each other, uncertain. The tension in the room was thick, and Liam felt every second stretch painfully. He had no idea how they would react. But he knew this was the only chance they had. One officer finally spoke up, his voice low. "And what do you want from us? To lay down our weapons and trust you? After everything that's happened?" "We want peace," Kale said, her eyes locking with his. "We want to stop the bloodshed. We want to give both our peoples a chance to rebuild. But we need your help." Liam held his breath, waiting for their response. The fate of everything rested on this moment. The room was thick with silence. The human officer stared at Kale and Liam, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Kale's words, her calm but powerful declaration, seemed to fill the space between them, while the human sat frozen. Unsure of how to react, Liam's heart hammered in his chest. He had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable. In this moment, everything hinged on how they responded to the Vulpine. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything could fall apart. The war could continue. More lives would be lost. One of the officers, a woman with short, dark hair and a sharp gaze, stood up slowly. Her uniform was pressed and immaculate, but her eyes told a different story, one of exhaustion, of someone who had seen too much. She looked at Kale with an intensity that made Liam shift uncomfortably. "You're asking us to trust you," she said, her voice cautious but firm. "After everything that's happened. You want us to believe that the Vulpine aren't the enemy?" Kale didn't flinch. "Yes," she answered simply, "because the truth is, we never were. We were forced into this war just like you were. The stories you've heard, they were meant to make you afraid of us. But they are lies, human lies told by those who want to keep the war going." The officer was silent for a long moment. Then, she sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "I've heard those stories. Hell, I've lived them. We've all seen what the Vulpine are capable of. But the truth is, no one has ever stopped to ask why. We've been taught that the Vulpine are monsters, that they're out to kill us. But what if we've been wrong all along?" Liam could hardly believe what he was hearing. The officer was agreeing with them? After everything, was she actually considering it? For a moment he felt a spark of hope. Could this work? Could they actually stop the war? But the moment was shattered when a voice broke in, sharp and angry. "You're all fools," one of the male officers spat. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "This is treason. These aliens are the enemy. They've killed our people, destroyed our cities. How can you sit here and talk about peace with them?" The room fell into chaos as the officer's outburst sparked a heated argument among the humans. Some shouted angrily, while others remained silent, their faces tense with uncertainty. It was clear that the seeds of doubt had been planted, but whether they would grow into a full-scale rebellion against the war was uncertain. Liam stood frozen in place, his mind racing. It was happening just like he feared. The division among the officers was growing, and he could feel the tension in the air. The military machine, built on years of hatred and distrust, wasn't going to just stop because of a few words. This wasn't just a battle against the Vulpine, it was a battle against everything they had been taught to believe. Kale remained calm, her expression steady as the arguments raged around her. She didn't speak, but her posture so confident, so poised spoke volumes. She was not here to argue with them. She was here to make them see the truth. And if they didn't, she wouldn't force them. Liam, however, felt the pressure mounting. He couldn't let this chance slip away. "Listen to her," he said, his voice breaking through the chaos. "You've seen what this war has done, the destruction, the loss. This isn't just about fighting for territory anymore. This is about Survival. If we don't stop this war, neither side will have anything left. The room went silent again, the argument subsiding as the officers turned to look at Liam. For a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. He could feel the eyes of the officers on him, their judgment weighing heavily on his every word. "What do you mean, survival?" the female officer asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Humans and Vulpine alike. We're both on the brink of losing everything," Liam said. "If we keep fighting, we'll destroy each other. There's nothing left to gain. If we don't stop, we'll end up in the history books as nothing more than another casualty of war." He paused, trying to find the words that would make them see reason. "We've been fighting the wrong war. This isn't about winning. This is about saving ourselves from annihilation." The room was still, the weight of his words sinking in. Kale stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the officers. She knew this wasn't just about diplomacy or convincing them with logic. It was about the choice they had to make now: peace or destruction. Another officer, a man with gray hair and a somber expression, finally spoke up. "So what exactly are you asking us to do? Lay down our weapons? Abandon the fight?" "We're not asking you to abandon your people," Kale answered, her voice strong. "We're asking you to stop the war before there's nothing left to fight for. Help us find a way to survive together." The tension in the room was unbearable. The officers exchanged glances, uncertainty still clouding their faces, but Kale's words had planted a seed, and Liam could feel it. The doubt was there, just beneath the surface. They were beginning to question everything they had been taught. Finally, the female officer spoke again, her voice softer but filled with resolve. "We'll give you a chance, but you'll have to prove it. To the soldiers, to the commanders, to everyone. If we're going to end this war, we'll need more than just words." Liam's heart soared, but he knew this was just the beginning. "We'll prove it," he said, his voice steady. "We'll show them the truth." Kale nodded, her eyes gleaming with a quiet determination. "We'll show them together." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. The decision had been made, but there was no turning back. As the officers left the room to discuss the future of the war, Liam could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. This was it. The moment when everything could change. Kale stood beside him, her posture still poised and calm, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps hope, in her amber eyes. She had done what she set out to do. She had planted the seed of doubt, the idea that peace was still possible. Now it was up to them to water that seed and watch it grow. Liam, still processing everything, couldn't help but think back to his first moments with Kale. How he had feared her, how he had thought the Vulpine were nothing but monsters. But now, standing beside her, he knew he had made the right choice. The war, the fighting, it had to end. The officers returned, and the female officer, who had been one of the first to listen, approached Kale and Liam. Her expression was no longer filled with the anger and fear from earlier. It was calm, thoughtful. "We've decided," she said, her voice firm. "You were right. The war needs to end." Liam let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. It wasn't over yet, but this was a major step. "So what now?" he asked, glancing between her and Kale. "We're going to call a ceasefire," the officer replied. "We'll negotiate terms with the Vulpine, but it can't just be us. We need the support of the rest of the military, the other factions. We need to show that peace is worth fighting for. We need to prove that we can survive without destroying each other." Kale nodded, her gaze steady. "We will work together. We'll show them that it's possible." The next days were a blur of frantic meetings, secret negotiations, and heated discussions. The ceasefire was declared, but there was no guarantee that it would last. Both sides had been fighting for too long, and there were still those who believed the war was the only way forward. But the seeds had been planted. And there was hope where there had been none before. Liam found himself in a conference room with Kale and the military leaders of both sides. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't the sharp, violent kind they had once known. It was a different kind of tension, the kind that came with trying to create something new, something that didn't fit the mold of what they had been taught to expect. "Let's be clear," one of the human commanders said, his voice gruff, but not without a hint of respect. "This isn't a surrender. It's a truce. We're giving peace a chance." Kale spoke next, her voice calm but full of authority. "And we will honor it. The Vulpine are not your enemies. We will no longer fight, but we ask that you remember this. The future doesn't have to be built on bloodshed." Liam could see it in the eyes of the commanders and soldiers around him, the doubt, the uncertainty, but also the beginnings of something new. For the first time in a long while, the idea of peace felt possible. And for the first time, he saw Kale as something more than an enemy. She was a symbol, a living example of the possibility that both sides could survive, without destroying the other. But the road ahead would not be easy. There were those who would resist, who would try to tear down this fragile peace before it could take root. But Liam knew that it was worth fighting for. This was no longer just about winning a war, it was about winning the future. The days turned into weeks, and the ceasefire held. The negotiations between the Vulpine and the humans grew stronger. There were challenges, of course. Old wounds didn't heal overnight, and trust was hard to come by. But the signs were there. The Vulpine and the humans began to share resources, to communicate, to work together to rebuild what had been lost. Liam found himself working side by side with Kale in ways he could never have imagined before. They shared stories of their worlds, their struggles, their hopes for the future. He learned more about the Vulpine, about their culture, their values, their pain. And in turn, Kale began to understand the humans better, their fears, their determination, their need for security. One day, as Liam and Kale stood on a newly built observation platform, overlooking the once destroyed landscape that was slowly being rebuilt, Kale spoke. "Do you think it will last?" she asked quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon. Liam looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know it's worth trying." Kale's lips curled into a faint, hopeful smile. "Then that's enough." And so, as the sun set over the horizon, casting its golden light over the newly formed alliance, Liam felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. The war wasn't over yet. There would still be challenges, setbacks, and struggles. But for the first time, there was hope, a hope that peace, once thought impossible, might just be within reach. Together, humans and Vulpine had started something new. And no matter how hard the journey ahead might be, they would walk it together.